Well, welcome back to Spotlight. I'm Ed Wenk. I'm here with Mr. Jeffrey Brooks. Jeffrey Brooks, yes, he's writing books. Jeffrey Brooks, he's the curator of the Maritime Center at Museum at H.W. Community College. He's also a history teacher, and he knows a lot about Virgin Islands history. He's an avid sailor and likes boat building. He's done a study in boat building. Welcome, Mr. Brooks. Good to see you.
Good to see you, and I want to thank you for having me here this evening.
My pleasure,
Appreciate it.
my pleasure. Beautiful book.
Thank you.
Well illustrated, very colorful illustrations done by Lute Durant, and it's a real gem, and it's easy to follow. It's almost, well, I wouldn't say almost a children's book, but anyone can look at it and you can see the history of sloop building in the territory through this one story.
Well, it's designed to be used in the school system,
Okay.
and that was our main push, was to have something available for younger primary students so they could learn about this at a young age. It was part of the Maritime Heritage Program we've been developing at the college and at the museum. But it also kind of doubles as a coffee table book. We think it has interest to anybody, adults and children alike. And even we're hoping cruise ship tourists will want to get copies of it.
Well, it's certainly a good idea, and when I didn't have a chance to really read it, but I looked through it, and it brought back a lot of fond memories
Yeah.
for me because I grew up in that period of boat building. One of my neighbors, Osmond Davies,
Oh, yeah.
was he used to build the smaller boats. He wasn't a sloop builder, even I think he might have built one or two sloops.
Well, he built a youth instructor.
But he, I know all the fishing boats in the village. He built them, and at that time he had the little one-cylinder seagulls.
Oh,
engine,
yeah.
little-
Yeah,
little
we have
engine.
two of those at the museum.
Yeah, and so he brought back a lot of fond memories for me. Your motivation, of course, is to preserve the history. And how did you get to compile all that information?
Well, I started, I guess, 11 years ago. I was hired, and Dr. Wheatley gave me my marching orders of what they wanted me to do. And one of the tasks was to take care, preserve the boats that we had already that were in the water, to use them in regattas and any place that we could show them off. And also, another task was to create a maritime museum in the brand new Marine Center. And I was very fortunate, and in my past life, I did different things which ended up giving me specific talents that helped me in that endeavor. And so for the last 10 years, we've been building the museum. I went out and tried to gather as much information as I could. And as I did it, I would learn about the boats. And then when you started to learn about that, you would learn about the people that built them. And once you learned about the people that built them and captained them, all of a sudden you got to know what this culture was really like. And I realized how unique it is. I mean, it's like no other.
Well, when I looked through it, I saw all the tools that were used, all hand tools
Yeah.
that were used to build the boats. Before you saw the tools, were you able to discern how the boats are being built? Was it a marvel to you how this is being done?
I was a carpenter before I came here for 30 years.
Oh, okay.
And I knew how to use all those hand tools and had them already. But as far as the application of using them on boats, forget it, no. I had to learn that all over again.
And then the cutting the material for the boats
Yeah.
from the trees.
Yeah.
You know, I often look at that part of our history as the era of genius of our forefathers.
I agree with you.
You know.
Yeah, you won't get an argument from me on that.
So you're hoping that as young people we will be able to tell, but we remember, and we will be able to find out about the story of boat building.
Exactly.
Through the book. Now, when you were talking to Mr. White and Anagata and working with him on the boat, any special things came to you that you wanted to share about what you were doing?
He, Mr. White, I met him in 2003, and he told me I told him I took care of his boat Moonbeam, and he said, "Well, I'm getting ready to build another one," and I asked him if I could come and help, and he said okay. And we would work mostly on weekends. And normally a boat, if you worked full time like that, would take about 4 months to build. But because we did it on weekends, it took about a year and a half. And I would travel over there, and we would work Friday, Saturday, and Monday sometimes. And we'd start work at 7, and I'd get up at 6:30 or something. I'd come out, and he'd already been up for an hour at daylight, sharpening his tools. And when I got there on time, he'd act like I was late. He'd say, "Come on, Brooks, we got work to do." You know? and the hardest part was going out into the bush and cutting the frames and branches for the trees. And you have to have a pattern piece. And you go up and you know the right tree to go to, which is very specific.
And what was the name of the tree?
Out there, we used a tree called a buttonwood and a type of acacia that only grows there called a poke-me-boy. And if we were building a boat here, it would be cedar, it would be white cedar, and that's why it's our national flower and tree. But it doesn't grow out there well enough, so we used these other woods. And you'd walk up and you see a branch that looks right, you put the pattern on it, and if it's close enough, you cut a little bit past it. And you never cut the whole tree, you only cut the branches. And that way the tree can keep growing and make more frames.
Okay. So you had this little, you had to have this certain shape.
Yep.
A certain V shape. And once you got that, and then what was the process like? What happened after that? Because if the tree had a back on it, that piece that you cut off would be rough.
Sometimes certain pieces we would take hatchets and trim them up out in the bush before we carried them back to our workplace. But otherwise, we would just collect a whole bunch of frames, and we would carry them back to some sea grape trees he had on his property with a couple of sawbucks and some plywood on it. And then you would take an adze, which is the primary tool in traditional wooden boat building. And you would make chalk marks around the thing and cut saw cuts, and then you would work on these branches and turn them into square frames. And I had my own adze, and I brought it, and I'd used it for years, but never in this application. And he and I would make frames together, and when I was finished, my frame would have like these little chop marks in it, right?
Well, it would be smooth.
Smooth. It looked like a piece of glass. You couldn't believe a human made it. It looked like it came out of a machine. And I'll tell you how old I was, but he was 76 when we were doing this work. And he'd been doing it since he was 17.
And when you say square, you mean they had to have a flat surface to hold the planks?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you would take the round branch and you would take a compass with a piece of chalk and you'd go around both sides marking it. Then you take a handsaw and you cut down and you stop at each chalk mark about that far apart. And then you lay it on the ground and you take the adze and you pop out all those little pieces and you end up with a perfectly dimensional frame. You can see them.
And I was getting ready to say, and these are the frames.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And this is all from the tree trunks, tree branches. And then of course you would have, then the planks would go around. Did we import lumber for planks, or we import the lumber for the planks?
The frames, and we would, a lot of times we would import the lumber for the keel, which is like the foundation of the boat, and that'd be made out of greenheart or another heavy wood, and we would trade with people down in Guyana, Trinidad, Grenada was a good place to source that stuff. So our boats were already trading all over the Caribbean.
And
And
that brings me to, in the time we have left, to the social economic importance of the sloop in our history. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Traditional sloops and boat building were the mainstay of our economy here for well over 100 years. And we were one of the 4 major boat building islands in the Lesser Antilles. The others were Carriacou down by Grenada, Bequia in St. Vincent, and Anguilla and us. And we did, not only did we build boats to use ourselves, but people came here and bought them from us and took them to other places. And the really neat thing is that the design of these boats is unique in the whole world. There's not another hull shape quite like this. And the other 3 islands have certain design features that identify them from those islands. But we know where those designs came from. But we don't for sure know where ours came from.
That's the testimony to the uniqueness
Oh, yeah,
of the design.
yeah. So, go ahead.
Go ahead, no,
Well, so you have this unique design. You have these skilled craftsmen. And when I say these guys were good boat builders, they were on a par with anybody in the whole world. There was a guy named Voyston Pickering who built the Joan of Arc. And he left after that and married somebody in Long Island, New York, and ended up building America's Cup racing boats. I mean, he was all of them were just incredibly skilled craftsmen.
And during that time, these sloops allowed us to trade.
We-
Talk to us about that economic
Okay.
use of the sloop.
Within the Virgin Islands, there were donkey trails. There were no roads. If you were going to travel from Road Town to East End or any place, you got in a boat and did it. And almost every family had a boat. Every bay had numerous boats. They carried people to school on other islands. They carried people to the doctor. We traded supplies all over, and for 100 years, we were the major supply of beef to St. Thomas. Beef and all kinds of provisions.
And of course, lots of fishing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's the other thing was, fish and stuff.
Well, it's great. I'm going to turn in the clock. But you're launching a book. What day? When?
Launching is the day after tomorrow, Thursday. It's at the Central Admin Complex at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the public is cordially invited to come, and I would encourage everybody to come. We'll be selling these books for $30 a piece. They'll be autographed by Lutai and myself, and then after that they'll be available in different bookstores and at the college, at the museums. And we are trying very hard to make these books very affordable, and it's our goal that they end up on the table of every local family in the Virgin Islands and many school children. We're giving free copies to the schools and all the libraries in the territory.
Well, certainly it's a work of art. It's very well done, very well written, well laid out, easy to follow. Great story, great instructional manual.
Yeah, exactly.
Great instructional manual. It identifies all the tools. It identifies all the pieces of wood, the whole process.
The parts of the boat.
The parts of the boat.
Yeah.
The whole process is laid out. I think everyone really should have one.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a fantastic job, and I wish you much success with
Thank
it.
you.
I thank you for my personal autograph copy.
Yeah. It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me tonight. It's great.
And that's again Thursday,
Thursday at 4:30, the day after tomorrow, at the Breezeway at the Central Admin Complex. So please come out and support us. Thank you, sir.
Well done. Yes, that's a conversation with Jeffrey Brooks, and he's just written Building a Virgin Island Sloop, the story of Sea Moon. And I have to tell you, it's a good job. It's a really good job, illustrated by Lute Duran, and certainly it gives us a fantastic look at our history, our past, and for many of us who are over 50, I would say, over 50, between 50 and 70, would have lived during this period and would really enjoy having a copy of this book. We're going to take a break and come back with Shayna Smith and Judy Haycraft. We're going to be talking about the leadership conference that's coming up at Eileen L. Parsons Auditorium, and what that means for development of leadership in the country and how you can participate in that event. Keep it locked right here. Spotlight will be right back after these words from our sponsor.
Spotlight is brought to you by Tortola Concrete Limited, Clarence Thomas Limited, and H. Lavity Stout Community College.